First encounter. Ethan Carter had spent most of his life designing buildings, not falling in love. At 34, he had built a name for himself as a successful architect, crafting breathtaking skyscrapers that touched the clouds. He believed in structure, in logic, in the predictability of blueprints and the certainty of concrete. Love, however, had no blueprint. It all started on a quiet afternoon in a charming little cafe nestled between the old streets of Chicago. Ethan was there for his usual espresso, sketchbook in hand, lost in designs for his latest project. The world outside was a blur until she walked in. Isabelle Laurent. She wasn't loud or flashy, but something about her presence commanded attention. Maybe it was the way her confidence radiated in every step she took, or how her eyes, deep and knowing, held the wisdom of years. She was older, perhaps early 40s, but there was an undeniable elegance to her. She ordered her coffee, oblivious to the way Ethan's gaze lingered a little too long. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was intrigue. An unexpected connection. Fate, as it often does, worked its magic when Ethan found himself commissioned to renovate a historic building downtown, one that belonged to Isabelle. She was an art historian running a boutique gallery inside the aged, charming structure. The moment Ethan walked through those antique doors, their eyes met again, and something shifted in the air. "You?" Isabelle arched a brow, recognizing him from the cafe. Ethan chuckled. "Guess we're destined to keep running into each other." He wasn't the kind of man who fumbled for words, but something about her presence made him feel both grounded and weightless at the same time. Their conversations started off about architecture and art, but quickly veered into something more personal. Ethan found himself captivated by Isabelle's stories of traveling through Europe, her passion for Renaissance paintings, her belief that art was not just an escape, but a mirror to the soul. For the first time in a long time, Ethan wasn't thinking about deadlines, projects, or blueprints. He was thinking about her. A love that shouldn't be? As days turned into weeks, their connection deepened. They'd stay back after meetings, lost in conversations about life, love, and everything in between. The attraction was undeniable, yet unspoken. Ethan knew he was falling for her. But falling wasn't part of the plan. He was younger, and he could already hear the whispers, the raised brows, the silent judgments. What was a 34-year-old successful architect doing falling for a woman nearly 10 years older? Isabelle felt it too. The hesitation, the fear. "We live in a world that thrives on perception, Ethan," she said one evening as they walked through the dimly lit streets after dinner. "People like their love stories simple. Man meets woman. They're the same age. They follow the script. But us?" Ethan stopped, turning to her. "Since when have you cared about what people think?" She hesitated. "I don't. But I care about you. And I don't want you resenting me someday because of this." His jaw clenched. "You're not giving me enough credit." She smiled softly, a touch of sadness in her eyes. "I'm giving time credit because time changes people, Ethan." The tension between them crackled like a storm waiting to break. The first kiss and the unspoken truth. One night, after an exhausting day at the gallery, Isabelle found herself alone, overwhelmed with work. Ethan, knowing she was struggling, showed up unexpectedly with takeout and a quiet smile. "You looked like you needed this," he said simply, setting the food down on her desk. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him, the man who had somehow woven himself into her life in ways she never expected. "You're making this difficult," she whispered. Ethan took a slow step forward. Maybe some things are meant to be difficult. And before either of them could talk themselves out of it, he closed the space between them, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both urgent and gentle. It was inevitable. And yet it was terrifying, because loving him meant stepping into something that had no guarantees. As she pulled away, breathless, Ethan searched her eyes. "Tell me this isn't real," he challenged softly. "Tell me you don't feel it too." Isabel's heart ached. Of course, she felt it. But feeling wasn't the problem. Time was. And time had a way of taking what it wanted. The secret begins. They didn't speak of it again, not at first. They continued working together, stealing glances, brushing hands, sharing moments that lasted just a second too long. But love is not something that can be contained. Soon, their late nights at the gallery turned into whispered confessions. Their professional boundaries blurred into stolen kisses. And before they knew it, they were entangled in something neither of them could walk away from. Yet, for all the passion, an unspoken fear loomed. Isabel's friends noticed. Her colleagues whispered, "Was it real? Was it worth it?" She wasn't sure. But Ethan was, and he was willing to fight for it. The only question was, would she let him? When love becomes real, the weight of a secret. For weeks, Ethan and Isabel existed in the quiet bubble they had built. Late-night conversations, lingering touches, and the undeniable energy between them that neither could ignore. But secrets were heavy, and their love was no exception. Ethan wanted the world to know. To him, love didn't come with a manual of rules, and he wasn't about to let the opinions of others dictate his heart. But Isabel? She wasn't as fearless. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted one evening as they sat in her gallery after hours, the dim light casting shadows against the painted walls. Your whole life is ahead of you, Ethan. I've already lived so much of mine." Ethan frowned. "And I don't get to choose who I love?" Her eyes softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, fingers tapping against the glass of wine in her hand. The doubt wasn't about love. It was about fear. A love that refuses to hide. Despite Isabel's hesitations, Ethan refused to stay in the shadows. He began introducing her to his close friends, bringing her into his world in small but deliberate ways. He wanted her to feel the certainty he did. But the world didn't make it easy. At an industry event, whispers started before they even arrived. Isabel could feel the stares, the silent judgments. A 42-year-old woman with a 34-year-old architect? It was an anomaly, something that didn't fit the mold of conventional relationships. One particularly biting comment came from a fellow architect. "Isabel, didn't expect to see you here. You've been keeping good company, I see." Ethan tensed beside her, his hand instinctively reaching for hers. He wouldn't let them tear her down. "She's the best company I've ever had," he said smoothly. "You should be so lucky." Isabel squeezed his hand in silent gratitude. But could love survive under the weight of constant scrutiny? The breaking point. Doubt had a way of creeping in. The more Ethan embraced their relationship, the more Isabel pulled away. She saw his world, young, vibrant, filled with promise, and then she saw herself, aging, cautious, afraid. One night, as they sat by the lake just outside the city, Isabel voiced what she had been holding in for weeks. "I think I'm holding you back," she whispered. Ethan turned to her, brows furrowing. "Holding me back?" Isabel, you're everything." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Not forever. Time isn't fair, Ethan. In 10 years, you'll be in your prime, and She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't want to be the reason you resent me someday." Ethan clenched his jaw. "You think I'd ever regret loving you?" She exhaled. "I think people regret things they never expect to." The silence stretched between them, heavy and filled with uncertainty. For the first time, Ethan feared losing her. The first goodbye. It wasn't an argument, nor a dramatic ending. Isabel simply distanced herself, believing she was doing what was best, believing that she was protecting him from a future he couldn't yet see. Ethan, determined as ever, didn't let go easily. "You don't get to decide what's best for me," he told her one evening at the gallery, frustration evident in his voice. "That's my choice." But she shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "And this is mine." With that, she walked away. Not because she wanted to, but because she thought it was the right thing to do. Ethan stood there, watching her leave, knowing that for the first time in his life, a structure he couldn't control was falling apart. The distance between us. Ethan had always been a man who built things, homes, skyscrapers, dreams. But as he stood alone in his empty apartment, staring at the city's skyline, he realized some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some things must be rebuilt from the ground up. It had been 6 months since Isabel left. 6 months of silence. 6 months of wondering if she was thinking about him the way he thought about her. 6 months of regret. He had tried reaching out at first. Texts she never replied to. Calls that always went to voicemail. At some point, he stopped trying. Not because he didn't care, but because he realized she had made her choice. But understanding her decision didn't make it hurt any less. Isabel's struggle. On the other side of the city, Isabel tried to convince herself she had done the right thing. She buried herself in work, taking on new projects at the gallery, traveling to art exhibitions, keeping herself too busy to think about Ethan. But no matter where she went, no matter how many hours she worked, he was always there, in the brushstrokes of the paintings she curated, in the quiet hum of the cafe where they used to meet, in the stillness of the nights when her mind wandered back to him. She had told herself this was for the best, that Ethan deserved someone who could match his future, not someone burdened by the past. But was she truly protecting him? Or had she been protecting herself? An unfinished story. Ethan had almost given up hope until fate intervened. One evening, as he walked through a local art exhibit, admiring the pieces on display, he froze. There, across the gallery, stood Isabel. She hadn't seen him yet. She was deep in conversation with a fellow curator, her expression composed but her eyes distant. She looked different. Or maybe it was just that she had always looked this way, and he had never noticed the sadness in her before. Before he could stop himself, he took a step forward, then another, and then she turned, and their eyes met. Time stopped. The noise of the gallery faded into nothing. "Ethan," she breathed, his name escaping her lips like a secret she hadn't meant to reveal. He swallowed hard. "Hi, Isabel." The curator she had been speaking to politely excused himself, leaving them alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Isabel sighed, offering a small, tentative smile. "I didn't expect to see you here." Ethan smirked, a ghost of his old self resurfacing. "I didn't expect to see you either. I thought you were avoiding me." She flinched slightly but didn't deny it. I wasn't avoiding you, Ethan. She trailed off, searching for words. I needed space. He nodded slowly. And did you find what you were looking for? She hesitated, then whispered, I don't know. The conversation that changed everything. They left the gallery together, walking in silence through the city streets. Finally, Ethan broke the quiet. Why did you leave? She exhaled, her gaze distant. Because I was scared. Scared of the future. Scared of holding you back. Scared that one day you'd wake up and realize I wasn't the right choice. He stopped walking and turned to face her. And what if I already knew you were the right choice? What if I never had doubts? Isabel's breath hitched. Then I would say you don't understand what time does to people. You don't understand what it's like to feel like you're running out of it. Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Time doesn't scare me, Isabel. Losing you does. She looked up at him then, and for the first time in months, she let herself believe. A new beginning. They sat on a park bench, talking for hours, about life, about love, about what they had lost and what they still had. For the first time, Isabel let herself imagine a future with Ethan. A future that wasn't dictated by fear or judgment, but by love. Ethan smiled, squeezing her hand. So, what happens now? Isabel hesitated, then finally smiled back. Maybe we stop running. Love, fear, and forever. Ethan had spent months rebuilding his life, but the moment he saw Isabel again, he knew. She was still the missing piece. Sitting on that park bench, watching her hesitate between fear and longing, he made a decision. He wasn't going to let her run again. The night that changed everything. Stay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Stay, Isabel, with me. She closed her eyes, her hands clenched in her lap. Ethan, this isn't that simple. But it is, he countered, turning to face her fully. It's love, Isabel. It's the one thing that should be simple. A tear slipped down her cheek. And what if I can't give you forever? Ethan reached forward, gently wiping the tear away. Then I'll take whatever you can give me. A year, a decade, a lifetime. It doesn't matter. I just want you. Her heart ached with the weight of her own fears, but looking at him, at the unwavering certainty in his eyes, she realized something. She had spent her whole life trying to control time, when all she ever needed was to live in the moment. She exhaled, her fingers trembling as she reached for his hand. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Love without boundaries. The months that followed were a whirlwind of stolen kisses, shared laughter, and whispered confessions in the dead of night. They traveled together, visited art museums in Paris, walked through the streets of Rome, and spent weekends in cozy cabins away from the world. For the first time, Isabel let herself love without looking over her shoulder. But love, no matter how deep, was not without its challenges. People still talked. Whispers of, isn't she too old for him, followed them in social circles. Friends questioned Ethan's decision. Even Isabel's own doubts resurfaced at times. But every time fear crept in, Ethan silenced it with love. You still think you're holding me back? He asked one night, lying beside her under the city skyline. She traced circles on his palm. Sometimes, He turned to her, pressing a kiss against her forehead. "Then I guess I'll just have to keep proving you wrong." And he did, every single day. A test of love. One evening, as they sat at their favorite cafe, Ethan reached into his pocket, his heart pounding. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. Isabel's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan." "Before you say anything," he interrupted, "this isn't me asking for forever. This is me asking for today, and tomorrow, and the next day, however long you'll let me love you." He opened the box to reveal a simple yet stunning ring, not a traditional engagement ring, but a promise. A promise that their love would be on their terms. Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks. She had spent so long pushing love away, but now, she wanted to hold on to it with both hands. She nodded, unable to speak. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, kissing her softly. "No more running," he whispered against her lips. "No more running," she promised. A love that lasted. Years passed, but their love never faded. Ethan continued designing some of the most breathtaking structures the world had ever seen. Isabel's gallery flourished, her name becoming renowned in the art world. And through it all, they had each other. Time didn't break them. Time proved them right. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their home, watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Isabel with a smirk. "So, do you still think I'll regret this someday?" She laughed, leaning into him. Because if this is regret, I never want to know what certainty feels like." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the way he had always meant to. Because some love stories don't follow the rules. Some love stories rewrite them. The end. Loved this story? There's more where that came from. Subscribe to my channel for more heart-touching romance stories that will keep you hooked till the very end. Don't miss the next one.